Hi, it's Lisa, and I'd like to dedicate this new video series to my students in 101A Geography and also in Geography 314 at the University of Victoria on Vancouver Island, British Columbia in Canada. And we've been doing a bunch of stuff in our classes about food and the environment and the sorts of impacts that our consumption has on the environment. So things like carbon footprints and virtual water. But one of the problems is that real life intrudes. You got good intentions, but students and untenured faculty like me have a limited range of options in terms of what food we can afford. Because the really fancy artisanal stuff isn't always in our budget, or you might live in a region or a neighborhood where you just can't get certain things. And I know with COVID, a lot of my students are living across the country, often in smaller towns, and you just can't get certain things at your local grocery store. Even in my hometown of Hamilton, until fairly recently, there was a limited range of food you could find in town, and you have to go to Toronto to get certain kinds of items. So I wanted to kind of make a bunch of dishes that maybe you could try out that would help with things like reducing food waste or picking plant-based foods, eating healthier meals, and cutting down grocery bills. Again, these are all great intentions, but if you're out of money or you're pressed for time, you're working or you got to do schoolwork, quite often you just don't have a lot of time to make fancy things. So one of the things I've found over the past few years is if you find food that tastes good to you, and again, your taste is your own, and I'm not going to tell people what they should or shouldn't like, but if you find spices or seasonings that you really enjoy, and you find stuff that you can cook or at least find fairly easily around you, it makes it a lot easier to stick to good intentions about eating. In my case, it's stuff like eating more greens. I'm not that fond of kale or cabbage, and I know that's sacrilege on the West Coast where kale is like a religion out here. So I have to figure out how to disguise it so it's less noticeable and I can actually eat it. So I've got a really great pasta fazool recipe I'll post later that's really good for that kind of thing. Another thing that I've noticed is stuff like tofu. It's fairly bland, and you kind of need to eat it with something to make it flavorful. And you can't just throw a slab of it on the grill. Like I saw at one party, my friends were kind of shocked. They're vegetarians. I'm not, but I felt their pain because our host said, "Here's some food for you, and just put this piece of tofu in the grill." And it's like, really? Because that takes a long time to cook because of all the water in it. And also, it's just not that great to eat tofu in that kind of situation. So I'll just kind of get into screen sharing here, and we can have a look at some of the slides I've put together. Here we go. And the dish that I thought I'd start off with is something I just call black beans and tofu. And there it is. And here's how to make it. It's adapted from a Sichuan Chinese dish called mapo tofu or mapo tofu, which is just tofu in a spicy sauce with some beans. And usually it's served on top of some rice. And I have to admit, the first time I had it in a restaurant down the street from me, I didn't realize that you had to eat it with something. So I was eating it, like it was soup. And it's like, no, that's kind of like spaghetti sauce. You have to have it with pasta. It's okay. Lesson learned. So this isn't the really authentic version, but it uses many of the same ingredients. I looked online and I found about 3 recipes and I kind of combined them based on what I had. And for me, when I was trying to do this sort of thing as a student, it came down to things that aren't too hard to find and aren't very expensive. So that was one particular area I was concerned with. Also, that doesn't take too long to cook or need really special equipment, because if you're sharing a kitchen with somebody, you might not have access to it all the time, and it might not have stuff that you need for some really fancy cooking. Also, it uses vegetables, or at least can accommodate vegetables as a side dish. And also a nice thing is that if you can find a dish where you can freeze portions for later meals, like something like chili, for example, that's a big help if you're trying to cook ahead of time for the rest of the week. And also a lot of room for tinkering and adjustment. So based on your taste or what's available, you can make substitutions or leave stuff out and it won't destroy things. And that's really important if you're trying to just kind of figure out what to do with what you got in the pantry, especially in the COVID era when going to the grocery store is an adventure. So this kind of ticks all the boxes for me anyway. So I thought I'll start off the series of videos with this. So what we need to do here is get some tofu, and I had some, but I did a longer version of this video and I already ate it. So you'll just have to imagine tofu as we've already seen it already in grocery stores and stuff. Um, Onions, ginger and garlic, a can of black beans, or if you like, you can use dried ones you've already soaked and cooked. Um, actually have been using adzuki red beans for this dish sometimes, either half and half or just the beans themselves, but black beans are great for this because they're easy to get hold of. Um, anyway, rice vinegar is really helpful. You can use white wine vinegar or ordinary white vinegar too if you've got it, but the rice vinegar seems to have this kind of underlying savory taste to it that really is nice. So that's something good to have. And a bit of cooking oil. I've been using olive oil because I've got some, but any kind of cooking oil would be good in this case. Some sugar and some five spice powder, if you can find it, or ground allspice, you can sub in as well. And this thing called chilli and oil with black beans that I'll show in a little bit. And those are the major things you'll need for this dish. And I'll put all this in the description for the video on YouTube. Okay, so the tofu side, again, tofu is just soybean curd, and the recipes I found for this dish suggest using the soft or silken kind of tofu. Oh, but that doesn't really matter, I found. You can use other types. I've been using the kind of pressed tofu, which has less water and is more dense. Doesn't really seem to matter for the dishes as to how it turns out. But if you have a special type that you like to use, go ahead and use that. And what you can do is, if it's really soft and breaks up a lot, you can firm it up a bit by simmering it for a few minutes and just enough water to cover it. So you're basically blanching it in that case. So if it's firmed up like that, you can just cut it up into chunks that are a bit larger than sugar cubes. Because this is a dish with the smaller beans in it, you can go a little smaller than if you were cooking a dish with really coarse vegetables in it. You'd probably use bigger chunks like you'd find in like Chinese restaurants and stuff when they have these mixed tofu and vegetable dishes. But I've been finding the smaller cubes seem to work pretty well for this. Okay, and then onions, again, optional. If you don't like onions, don't put them in, but I found like one medium or a couple of small onions, chop them up and you have 1 or 2 cups of onions then. And there's a picture there, lower right on the frame showing the ones that I did for this dish. And you don't have to be too careful about how you chop them up because they tend to, break down and soften a bit when you've cooked them anyway. So that's just all you need for that. The ginger, here's the ginger root. Fresh ginger is nice. A couple of tablespoons maybe of that, and you can scrape off the skin of the ginger and then grate it, or you can stick it in a food processor or blender and chop it up that way. But you can also use powdered ginger, or not at all if you don't like ginger. It's just up to you on that. Again, stuff like garlic as well. I know some people don't like it. In that case, just leave it out. But a couple of tablespoons of garlic. You can use a couple of cloves of fresh garlic, which is nice. Just smush it and chop it up fine. Or you can use powdered or granulated garlic. Again, doesn't really matter. I mean, I just use some fresh that I happen to have. But again, doesn't have to be too particular when you put that in. A can of black beans, say in the 540 milliliter or 19 fluid ounce range. So a couple of cups is all you need. Or you can just pre-cook some dried ones. And again, the red adzuki beans, the Japanese type, look like this. And you can soak and cook these in advance and use those instead, or you can do a 50-50 mix of black and red beans. It's up to you. So what you do with the beans is you have to have them cooked and soft ahead of time. So what you do is you squash them a bit with a potato masher and then add in a little bit of vinegar, rice vinegar to get them a little bit sour. A couple of tablespoons should do just fine with that. And then pick out a pan or a pot that you think is big enough because you're going to put everything in there eventually and just start cooking. So you cook the onions there, you can add a bit of oil to get them going in the pan, and then just cook them until they get a little bit softened along with the garlic and the ginger. So just kind of cook them all together till they start to get soft and the onions are translucent. And so you do the sauteing thing, and then you add in a little bit of that five spice powder, which some of the companies out there already have it already made up like that, or you can make your own. There's people on the internet that have instructions as to how to do your own spice mix, and that's good too. I've been getting mine at the bulk barn downtown. You can also, if you're out of five spice, you can put in a little bit of ground allspice. I find that works almost as well. But again, some people might not like that, so it's up to you as to how you want to season this. So you put it all, mix it in with the onions, and the heat should kind of start to release the flavors a bit. And then you add the black bean and vinegar mixture to the pan, and you cook it on medium heat till it starts to simmer a little bit. And then you can add a bit of sugar. and you're going for kind of a sweet and sour taste. So like maybe 1 or 2 tablespoons max of sugar, just to taste, depending on how you like that, and stir it around and wait for it to kind of get back to simmering point again. You're going to stir in, as you're doing that, a couple of tablespoons max because it's fairly hot. Well, but if you like heat, add in some more by all means. I've been getting this chili and uh, black beans and oil mixture here, and you can see there are other types of recipes that are kind of similar to this. I've noticed in the grocery store, in the Asian food or sauces section. It's just, if you look at the picture here, the one on the top is this black bean and chili sauce mixture. So it's kind of that reddish, oily base, and then it's got some crushed black beans and some chili flakes mixed in with it. And yeah, that's basically it. That's kind of the secret weapon in terms of giving you the flavor there. If you haven't got this, not to worry, you can probably make do with red chili flakes or ground cayenne. It's just a nice flavor to have in with the mixture of beans and tofu. And I've noticed that if you leave the dish to sit a little while, say overnight, and have it the next day, it tends to cool off a bit. I think it's because the beans absorb some of the chili, but you may have to put a little bit more to heat it up if you like warm food. Um, so that's just what I've been finding. So you got that stuff kind of mixed together, and then you start to stir in the tofu cubes. And you don't have to put the blanching water in. If you did blanch them, just kind of scoop out the cubes and put them into the main pan there, and just kind of stir them in as you're going, and keep the heat on, and just kind of wait because it'll take a while for it to heat up again because the tofu is probably going to be kind of cold by then. And so you should end up with this overall mixture here as you keep blending, and the liquid should be reduced a bit. So not too soupy, but if you just cook it like that, open, that should get rid of the water pretty quickly. And by the time it's well blended and it's kind of simmering a little bit, and the tofu doesn't take that long to cook really. And of course the beans are already cooked. So you're just kind of heating everything up and letting the flavors mix and reduce the liquid a little bit. So it should be kind of more like a stew than a soup by the time you're near the completion point. So when you're done, you can serve it over rice, long grain Chinese type rice or medium grained Japanese type rice. Doesn't really matter there. And it goes pretty well with the steamed vegetables or stir fried vegetables like broccoli or gailan or cauliflower, that sort of thing. And you can either mix all the vegetables in, or you can just have them on the side. It's up to you, whatever you prefer. So that's really how it goes with this dish. Not too difficult, not too much of a hassle. So that's why I like it. And take care, and I'll see you next time.